We are back for yet another CSM interview with Ankh Lai. Is that how you pronounce your name?
Close, Ankh Lai.
Ankh Lai, okay. Can you go ahead and introduce yourself? Tell us when you started playing, why, who you represent.
Yeah, absolutely. So I am a relatively new player myself. So I started playing in 2021, and it was a game that I'd been following in the news and seen pop up all the time over the years, but hadn't really thrown myself to the wolves and actually joined up until that point. But I was reading an article about the Battle of M2, and I thought, that sounds really cool. I want to get a part of that. So I signed up purely to look for those stories and those history moments to be a part of myself, and rapidly found myself extremely lost in the game, and both in the sense of how big the game is, but also how complicated, and I had no idea what I was doing. And it went very rapidly downhill from there. Like, I remember finishing the Sis of Eve arc and had no idea where to go next, no idea what to do,
Mm-hmm.
was completely and utterly lost. So I got drunk one night and took a roam into Lowsec and had my first ever loss in about 10 minutes of being in Tama. But it was after that I got an email come through from a new player corp that was running like Eve University style classes and stuff like that. It was like, hey, you died, and we're going to explain how we knew you died. Here's Z-Kill, and that's what this is. Come join the corp and we'll teach you how not to die. And that's what really got me stuck into Eve. If I'm being realistic, I probably would have quit the game at that point if it wasn't for that corp that brought me in. And I spent a good amount of time with them learning the game, and then eventually I joined Goonswarm, and I very much have the military way of doing things. So I learn by teaching. So I'll see one, I'll do one, and then I'll teach one. So I started teaching classes in Gooniversity as part of Goonswarm. So similar, just basic how to tackle classes and stuff like that. And at the time, I had a ridiculous amount of free time on my hands, so I was running a lot of classes. And eventually, this got me noticed by the people who were running Gooniversity, and then later by the Alliance leadership. So today, I run Gooniversity, as well as a couple of sort of adjacent groups as well that are now connected to Gooniversity, all around bringing both new players into nullsec and showing them the basics of the game, but also introducing to some of the more advanced concepts as well. Like we were talking about incursions at the start of this and POCVEN. So taking them from that, here's how you're going to get in your first ever fleet and how you're going to not jump through the gate when the FC says gate is red, all the way up to here's how you're actually going to start making meaningful amounts of ISK in the game. Here's how you're actually going to get into the next ships. Here's how you're going to look at building towards your first capital ship.
Very cool. So, of course, you're here because you're campaigning for CSM19. And you probably have a couple points, maybe three, that you'd like to tell us about.
Yeah, I mean, I'm centering everything on an overarching theme, which is making the new player experience more seamless, but also making it more community driven as well. So the CCP marketing team is fantastic at bringing new players into the game. It's hard sometimes to differentiate between what's an old and what's a new player, but the number of people or the number of accounts in the game is constantly going up at a steady pace. The challenge is the amount of people who are then dropping off at the end of it. So at the very sort of top of my campaign is making sure that every aspect of Eve is going to be pointing towards giving new players the next pathway to ultimately give them what I had when I first joined the game, and that's a community that showed me how to get started and where to go in the game. And there's a few more specific changes around that that I want to look at, particularly when it comes to the corp recruitment UI and that whole mess of a UI system that involves corporation management as a whole, but actually redesigning it to start pointing people towards communities like Eve Rookies, Eve University, so that they have those people who are going to guide them. Because there's no tutorial mission, there's nothing that the CCP can develop in game that is going to be as effective as people like yourself in teaching people the game and getting them to stay in the game.
Yep. Totally agree with that. So, anything else that you want to try to accomplish as CSM?
I mean, some little simple fixes. Insurance, for one, being a complete and utter mess. It is like, why do we have so many different tiers? But actually having the whole system redesigned as well, so it actually is geared towards being a new player benefit. We all accept that T2 ships are not going to pay out great, and that's fine because by the time you're flying T2 ships, you should be more experienced, should have a bit more knowledge of what you're doing, and should be generating your own ISK. But when it comes to losing, say, your first caracal in the game, for a new player, you're immediately going to be out about 8-9 million ISK, which
Yep.
to me or you is going to be nothing. But to a new player, that's going to be 4 or 5 hours of grinding level 1 missions to get that money back. And it can be those moments where, when we all join the game, we want to get in the biggest ship we can as quickly as we can because it's cool. And then you lose that ship, and it's everything you've earned up to this point in the game, and you lose it. That can immediately switch someone off from the game. So I want to have it redesigned so it is weighted more towards the actual hull price of a ship rather than some random mineral price from like 5 years ago. And then have it weighted so that T1 ships pay out towards sort of like 90%, and then have it staggered down from there after that to say like 50% for a T2 ship.
So here is the $1 million question, or maybe the million ISK. What would you do with the praxis?
The praxis is a good question, but it still can follow the same kind of basis of look at the hull prices. Because even when it is being given out for free, yes, we could be a little bit of insurance fraud, but it's when it's given out for free, it's also worth literally nothing on the market because everyone dumps them. So there's a minor risk there, but there's always going to be a minor risk that people will abuse mechanics in some way. I think the actual cost of that would be so minimal that it would completely be shadowed by the benefits of actually having it pay out something for the players who buy them. Because I know for myself, like one of the earliest ships I bought was a Gnosis with a Sister of Arxiv.
Yep.
If I'd have lost that ship, I'd have got nothing back.
Yep. Totally agree on that one. Okay, so you work with new players. What do you think one of the biggest challenges that they face coming into EVE? And maybe you can talk about both the challenges of bringing new players into Goons as well as new players just in general coming into the game.
I mean, in general, the challenge for new players is all around a lack of direction. It's not knowing what to do next. And most players will typically go through the tutorial, do a couple of the career agent missions, maybe get as far as doing the Sister of Eve epic art. And then there is literally no guidance after that of what you should do next. And you find a lot of players doing really inefficient things in terms of trying to make money, but they're doing it by mining in a rifter, and it's just going to be absolutely terrible experience for them all. Mining in a rifter, mining in a venture, but it's just going to be a terrible experience from all round. Whereas if we then expanded that out to maybe have some more, you have the epic arcs. The epic arcs are a great way to teach players the game and also introduce them into different areas of the game as well. So particularly having an epic arc that starts teasing into faction warfare. I think for generally speaking, for a lot of players to get into the community early on and get them introduced to small gang PvP, get them introduced to different communities, and also the lore and the culture around EVE. Faction warfare is a great start to that. Incursions is another one as well. So having those gateways and those designs in game to say, hey, this is an introduction to faction warfare, and by the way, these are some of the groups that run it, and you should start looking at that and doing that with them.
Okay.
When it comes to Goons and nullsec, the challenge actually becomes getting people on our services and getting people up to speed very quickly. Like it's one of the things I introduced early on when I took over Gooniversity was a how to Goon class, or it's now called the Imperium Basics. And that's getting people set up on services, getting them set up on Orv, getting them set up on Mumble and stuff like that. Because when you first join Goonswarm, there's a huge amount of information that is thrown at you to say, hey, you need to do all of these things before you can even go on a fleet. So we started running classes just to actually get people set up with all of that stuff. But then after that, the biggest barrier that new players are facing is it's a fear of making a mistake more than anything. You know, they don't want to be that guy that goes on a fleet and tackles the wrong thing, or bubbles the wrong fleet, or whatever it might be. And that fear tends to lead to a lot of them delaying when they actually go out on fleets, or not going out on them at all, or again just becoming inactive. So we run classes that cover every single possible situation they would have in any normal fleet, just to get them that comfort level, and also introduce a fear of dying as well.
Mm-hmm.
I do like a director blog that just talks about the stuff that Gooniversity is doing every month. And it's a bit of a joke and it's a bit tongue in cheek, but I'll always put the amount of times I've been shot by blues in there. But there's a reason why I do it every time I teach a class myself. I will ensure that I am killed by blues at the end, or one of my ults is killed by blues at the end, and I will shoot back at them. They're giving handout shits, and I'll shoot back at them, and hopefully kill a few of them before I go down. But I wanted to get comfortable with the fact that when you're in an alliance like Goons, you can get SRP if you die. So losing your ship is not a bad thing. I'm giving you a ship, I'm now going to try and blow it up, and you're going to blow me up. Get past that fear of dying, and everything else becomes a lot easier.
Okay. So one of the perceptions that a lot of people outside of the null block have, like say high seckers, is that null block brings players into their organization way too early. Like everyone is vying for those new players to get them in there, get them into the churning mill, get a number in. Do you think that that is an accurate perception?
I mean, there are plenty of corps out there within null blocks that do actively seek out new players. Personally, I agree that it shouldn't be the first place that a new player goes. And I say that as someone who went to nullsec within about 6 months of playing the game myself. The challenge of going too early is purely down to a skill issue. You don't have the skill points to fly a lot of the ships that are going to be taking part in these big alliance fleets, like 1,000-man fleets. Yes, you can bring a Crucifier, you can bring an Atron, you can bring a Condor, whatever, but you're always going to be wanting to go, well, actually, everyone else is flying T2 battleships. I want to fly a T2 battleship. And it does give that, it almost accidentally encourages people to start looking at skill injecting and stuff like that. Then we lose even more expensive ships. I think people need to take their time and really explore Eve and gradually move into nullsec. I think it should be nullsec and wormhole should be more the end game that people are looking for than necessarily first place they go. But that said, if it's something someone wants to do, then the pathways need to be there to enable them. And you know, Gooniversity exists for Goonswarm. Horde have their MBI program. Alliances will support people that want it, but I don't think anyone should be pushed to nullsec as like their first few months or the first year even.
When do you think, in your experience, that it's about appropriate, like maybe months or skill point wise, for people to come out?
Um, I'd say it would depend on what you've been doing in the game up until that point. If you've been going around faction warfare, for example, or running excursions, you've probably trained up a lot of the skills that are going to help you out in nullsec anyway. Especially when it comes to like incursions, because you can then start running incursions out in nullsec.
Right.
But you need to be at a point where you are able to comfortably make ISK with what you're doing, because whilst SRP and things like that exist, you're not going to be spoon fed any money. You still need to be able to make your own money out there once you get there. So it needs to be that point where you've established a decent income in high sec or in low sec, and once you're at that point and you can sustain yourself there, then nullsec is a way of getting an increase on the amount of money you can get, as opposed to trying to scrape by salvaging behind whoever's Stormbringer ratting.
So then, what suggestions would you give CCP to help improve new player retention?
I mean, it's going to be all about pointing people towards the different communities. And that goes back to the nullsec comment as well. A lot of players go to nullsec because they think that is the place they should be looking at. But actually, if you get people hooked on the earlier mechanics in terms of faction warfare, incursions, things like that, then you're going to immediately almost delay that journey for them and let them get a better experience when they do eventually go up there, if they even do. They might fall in love with high sec and stay out there, but they've got to give them opportunity. So CCP needs to really work the whole new player experience into to direct people towards these opportunities and these different communities. And the biggest advantage of that then becomes is all the different groups out there are going to get more people coming through, so therefore they can do more.
Yep.
Likewise, when places like low sec alliances, high sec alliances start getting those players come through, they're going to be more experienced, they're going to be more well rounded, they're going to understand the culture of the player base, because we're all slightly weird and very nerdy. It gets people comfortable with that before they get plunged into it.
Now, you work with new players. When is the last time that you actually ran through the NPE?
It was about 6 weeks ago. I fired up 3 ults, probably about a few weeks before, and went through it 3 times.
Cool.
And I've probably done it every 3 or 4 months or so since I started.
Very cool. What is one thing that you would like to see absolutely changed in the MPE?
I mean, I think I have to give credit to CCP. Like from when even I joined like 3 years ago to what it is today is 10 times better. Like the new player experience is great with the air missions or the air tutorial.
Yeah,
Um,
you probably started with the previous MPE, right?
yes,
Yeah,
exactly. Yeah.
yeah.
So credit to CCP, it has improved tenfold. The experience today is a million times better, and you start to understand those mechanics a lot better. But it still has the same problem of once you finish it, you're just plunged into the middle of nowhere and you're prompted to do some low level career agent missions. And the problem with pushing people directly to vote or straight to those career agent missions is you make people think that is what they have to do in the game, and that's what EVE is built around. Mission running is a perfectly viable thing, but it's not a viable thing for a new player who's yet to grind for standings and earn the to buy the ships needed to do the worthwhile ones. And when you've got players spending, half an hour doing a really inefficient level 2 mission and then getting a couple million ISK at the end of it, it's going to be disheartening for them as they do that. So for me, it would be not just funneling people straight into the mission running route, but actually offering, almost a pop up. It could be something as simple as a pop up of here are the top 3 things you should look at doing now that you finished the tutorial. Go give them a try, and then signpost and give guides and almost mini tutorials to get people into that.
So, listening to you, you are a player out of my own heart, or from my own heart. You're a community guy. What is your definition of community in Eve?
I mean, if we're being realistic, Eve is not the most polished game out there. It's not the most seamless game out there. The thing that keeps all of us playing is the friends that we have made it since we've joined the different groups and the different environments. It's I was saying before we went live on the stream to you, I had a guy in my call who sent me a goodie bag when my daughter was born. It's about knowing that if I don't log in for the next 6 months because I want to take a break from the game, those guys are still going to be there chatting to me on Discord. They're still going to be sending me messages on WhatsApp, and that is what makes this game absolutely phenomenal. I've gamed my entire life, and I've never found a community that has hooked me quite so well and made the amount of friends that I've made in this game anywhere else.
Yeah, I totally agree. Do you think that community can also be organizations that have no in-game foundings?
Um, yeah, I mean, there is always going to be if you look at the basis of where those friendship groups are forming, those could come from outside of even come into Eve. You have plenty of cases where, Goonswarm was founded from an external organization that came into Eve. And there's plenty of examples of that where groups have come from other games or other communities and they've moved along and they've built up from there, or they've evolved from that, or even actually they've just stayed the same size and it's like 10 friends who have just gone, we're going to run a corp together and we're going to do some mining because that's what we enjoy. And I don't think that is at all a bad thing, whether it starts in Eve or whether it comes from another place and brings it to Eve, as long as that becomes a part of a wider Eve community and it fits in with what the rest of the game base is all about.
Now, we talked a little bit before about toxicity, and that it does exist in Eve. Do you think it's a big issue?
Um, it pops up now and then for me. Like I still see people coming in and they'll say something that is just completely inappropriate and have to purge them. But I don't think it is something that is nearly as prevalent as it was 5 years ago, 10 years ago, or anything like that. I think the game has become very good at policing itself now, and there is very few places where toxicity of any kind is acceptable. And even the places where, they're still catching up with what should be acceptable and what isn't, are moving in the right direction at very least. So I don't think it's something that is as huge a problem as it is right now. But that said, it does still pop up, and you see this an uncomfortable amount of time, particularly when you look at, and I'm speaking from my own experience now as a null blocker. But when you see Dracaris or Fraternity out, and you'll see, and someone just put Smack Talk in local trade to 5, but you'll see people making racist joke about the Chinese in local chat and stuff like that whenever a Dracarys or a frat fleet comes through. The groups around them quickly start policing that and shutting it down, but there are still individuals out there who think that is perfectly acceptable.
Right. So then, what does your community or you yourself do when you encounter toxicity? And for those of you listening, I'm not talking about PvP. I'm not talking about ganking. I'm not talking about, your beef between Horde and goons or anything like that. I'm talking about all the stuff that just should never come into the game from the real world.
Yeah, so within Goonswarm, we've got a group of players called the Beekeepers. So anyone can make a report into the Beekeepers. It stays only with those people who are designated to be the Beekeepers and vetted, and they basically are the, for lack of a better description, the toxicity police for Goonswarm. So if there is issues out there and they only look at things that are separate to the game, like they don't look at PvP or ganking or anything like that, they will look at where someone is making racist comments, where someone is being abusive, where someone is, starting to bring real life into the game, and they will get shut down very, very quickly, and they will get removed from the alliance very, very quickly. And I think, again, purely from my own perspective, all the big nullsec alliances are 100% behind that. We had a guy come into my court the other day looking to join, mentioned that he was blacklisted by Horde, and turns out he made transphobic comments, which is why he got blacklisted by Horde. So he's now blacklisted by goons as well. He never even got an opportunity to join a goon corp before he got blacklisted.
And that's really, really good to hear. So now we're going to go to my favorite section of this interview. I got my crystal ball out, and you got onto CSM19.
Mm-hmm.
So you are in your very first meeting, and CCP reveals the plans for the next expansion, maybe the next 2 or 3. And nothing that you have campaigned for or have expertise in is going to be on the docket. What do you think you're going to do?
I mean, there's two sides to it. I mean, it's probably a likely story that things I don't have expertise in will come up quite a lot for me because I am terrible at pretty much most of the game, apart from just teaching people. I'm incredibly poor and I die all the time. So lack of expertise will probably pop up quite a lot. But I have built my team within Gooniversity around relying on other people's expertise, learning from them, and utilizing that to the best of their ability. So the very first thing I'd want to do is learn more about whatever it was that was coming up in this expansion from the people who are the experts. And there is a lot of people who are extremely knowledgeable on the CSM that I would lean on to learn from that. But ultimately, the campaign I'm standing on is around the new player experience and new player retention. So my question that I would be looking to pose back to CCP, regardless of what it was, is where is the new player angle to this? How is this going to benefit the new player when they're coming through? Because it's all great doing an expansion that's only going to be accessible to 10% of the player base. It's got to be something that will have an impact, even if it is a soft impact on the newest players that are coming through as well.
Okay, then you've played Eve for 3 years, and probably something that you really like doing or your community loves doing has been impacted, axed, changed. If this happens on your term and your community, you know that your community is going to hate it, but when you think about it, it's probably better for the game as a whole. What do you think you're going to do?
I mean, if I believe it's better for the game, then I will bite that bullet. It's always going to be that battle of fighting your own biases, and I will not pretend that I will be perfect because no one is. But if we take anti-blexers as a prime example, where a lot of people want to see anti-blexers get nerfed. They want to see the projection that they provide get nerfed. I love anti-blexers because I use them all the time. It's how I get through space. I was preparing for the Goonswarm's move into Tenerife earlier, and I was whizzing around grabbing stuff and putting cynos out using these anti-blexers. If they got nerfed, that would negatively impact me on a very bad basis. But at the same time, I do believe that the projection that they provide is bad for the game as it stands. There does need to be something that is done there. Be that bringing in maybe like some kind of fatigue timer or something like that, or whatever it might be. I don't know, but I would hope I would be able to look at it holistically from what is good for the game. Because ultimately, yes, it might be something that benefits me right now, but if it's bad for the game, then there's not going to be a game for me to play in a few years' time. So it needs to be something that's going to constantly improve it. Otherwise, I'm going to be stuck looking for something else to play.
Okay, then a lot of times when you're sitting on the CSM, there are plenty of groups that don't have real representation. So I don't know, let's say MPSI, who's, kind of opposite to what you're doing, comes to you and says, hey, we need help with something. Are you willing to talk to them and represent them?
Yeah, absolutely. And in my CSM thread, I actually referenced Spectrefleet a couple of times. And Virion Stoneshard is someone who's I'm in his DMs every now and then, and met him at FanFest. And again, MPSI was a group that really got me into the game in the first place anyway. So it's not something that I'm doing now, but it's something that I could give support to if they came to me. That said, if it was a group that came to me and I knew nothing about it, then I would be also be honest and say I'm probably not the best person to help you with this because I really don't understand it enough myself. And I'll pick on incursions. I've never run an incursion in my life, but I would at least then look to signpost to someone who does have that expertise who can help them with that issue as well.
Okay. And then the last question in this track, players have a perception that the CSM can go to CCP and demand fixes or demand changes. Have you given any thought to how you are going to balance the limitations put on you as a CSM member, like that you're only an advisor, you have this NDA, with making sure that the players are being heard?
Yeah, I was thinking about this one a lot actually, and it's that I think the biggest reason why this misconception comes about is because actually for a lot of CSMs, not all of them, some CSMs are absolutely amazing at this, but for a lot of CSMs, they don't really communicate back to the groups that they're with in terms of what they actually do. And obviously, there's limitations around the NDA in terms of detail, but they can at least start feeding this stuff back and communicating of, hey, there's some really good meetings today, we made some suggestions, whatever it might be. And having that constant line of communication will at least give people the comfort of both you are doing something, because the perception is also the CSM doesn't do anything and they just sit there and enjoy their free flight to Iceland once a year. But if that communication is coming back to everyone, then they'll start feeling that something is happening. And likewise, it also allows you to manage those expectations as well as, I don't have to be happy with everything that CCP does. I'm not going to be happy with everything CCP does. But at least if they feel like you've listened to their concerns about the issue and you've promised that I have raised this or I will raise this, then it gives them that feeling that you are doing what you can.
Okay. So now I have some questions for my community that they would like to know your stance as candidate. One of them is, what is your stance on multi-boxing? Where this question came from is half of my community are multi-boxers. They go out and they multi-box home fronts or maybe incursions or mining, whatever they go out there and mine or go out there and do. And the other half honestly believe that everyone should be limited to one account only, and maybe even get rid of characters 2 and 3. What's your stance?
Multi-boxing is what this game is built around. So without it, the game would be dead. CCP at a minimum would lose half their subscription, but it would probably see the end of the game. So I think any thoughts about meaningfully nerfing multi-boxing is going to fall on flat ears anyway, because CCP is not going to hurt the revenue stream. And to be honest, it's as long as the game is built with it in mind, I think it can be a good thing. There are some areas though where multi-boxing has become a massive problem. Home fronts being a key one. You will see people with fleets of multi-boxers with just one or maybe two people running them that are completely blocking it out from fleets of sort of real people to take part in those home fronts. But those can be fixed through other changes rather than trying to necessarily nerf a multi-boxing, but actually bringing in like limited PvP areas or adding home fronts to low sec so that people can contest those sites. Because the key thing is every single time a fleet of different people, assuming skill points are equal, ships are equal, a fleet of different people will always be one person multi-boxing. So you need to ease the mechanics around it to nerf where multi-boxing is being abused or multi-boxing is overpowered, rather than necessarily nerf the multi-boxing itself.
Okay. So another controversial topic is skill injectors. Where do you stand on those?
So I'm smiling because when I said before about new players injecting like crazy, I was definitely one of those new players as well. I think they're like, as someone who used them, I wish they never existed. They almost become that microtransaction within the game because as soon as you do one, you then want to start doing another. I only really stopped using skill injectors when it suddenly became completely worthless because I've got too much SP now. But yeah, it rushes you into ships that you aren't ready to fly, you aren't ready to undock. It makes you more likely to lose a very expensive ship that you can't afford to fly. There is some huge amounts of convenience with it. Like I wanted a new Blop Salt not too long back, and I just bought the injectors for it and quickly got that Blop Salt up and running. But those small conveniences aren't worth the ultimately. I would call it the gateway drug of you take one injector and you're going to want to buy 10 more.
Do you think that we could leave them in the game, but maybe alter them so that you can't use them for the first 30 days? You actually have to go out and try things, in an organic way. Would that be a better idea?
Yeah, I think limiting them to newer players definitely should be a thing. But I think even make it so that you can only use one a week or one a month or something like that. So you can't just shove 30 skill injectors out there and suddenly be in a marauder. Because we see it's like all the time in Gooniversity, we see people who have been playing the game for 2 or 3 months undocking in a marauder and losing it because they think that is the ship that they should be getting in, and they don't appreciate the risks of being in Goonswarm, or at least right now while we're in Delve, we've got NPC Delve right there. They know that they will get dropped and they will die, but they haven't learned these lessons yet in the cheaper ships, and they've just gone straight into the Marauder and lost billions of ISK instantly.
So, say that you were able to go to CCP and get rid of the skill injector. Do you think that that would mean that the blocks would have to um, look at their doctrine in order to include new players? Because now they're not going to be able to just go and inject to whatever's popular right now or whatever's being used.
I mean, I would say the blocks already do that anyway. Within Goonswarm, anything that is one of the free handout ships of Gooniversity have, they can join almost any fleet. The only exception being where it needs covert ops. Same with Horde. Horde hand out a bunch of ships that are new player friendly, and they can join pretty much any fleet as long as it's not covert ops required. So I think the blocks are already there with that. So if it was turned off overnight, I don't think that would be the issue. I think where the issue would be is you've got a lot of people, running skill farms and stuff like that. You've got a lot of people who've probably been investing and sat on skill injections for a long time who would potentially see that wealth disappear overnight. And that does need to be taken into account if you was just to kill them. So it would need to be something that would, be phased or be managed over a period of time to both make sure that it is achieving the purpose of not completely wiping out people's ISK reserves or whatever because they've sat there ISK in safe money, but also achieving the same aim of actually let's remove these gradually from the game or limit their use in the game because they are not healthy long term.
So, along the same line, what do you think about the new accelerators that are in the NES? Do you think those are a better alternative to skill injectors?
Um, I I think they're part of the same parcel. Really, they're not. I don't think they're as bad as skill injectors because they don't give almost like a medium hit. Like when you put a skill injector in, cool. I've now got 500,000 skill points. I can now jump into a ship and go do it right now. I think the fact it is softer and gradual over time is better. And to be honest, it's no different than buying implants. Setting up your learning clone. So yeah, I think they achieve somewhat the same thing, um, and certainly aren't nearly as bad as skill injectors.
Okay. And one last question, kind of not really along this line, but community kind of wants to know the current CSM candidates. It really sounds like that they're going to go after drone assist. What is your thoughts on this? Do you think it's a good idea, or do you think it's going to impact the game too negatively?
Um, I've got two mindsets to this. So you don't really see it too often anymore, but a lot of the observatory flashpoints in POC are run by multi-boxers who are using a bunch of Ishtars, and they're running drone or using drone assist so that they don't have to manage as many windows or don't have to pay attention to as many windows. So it comes back to what we're saying. It is a avenue to nerf those areas of play where people can take massive advantage of how easy it is to multi-box. But at the same time, there is still a massive use case for it where it is useful. And on the PvP side, running a gate camp, you've got a bunch of new players who are sat there in Vexers or whatever it might be. It helps remove an element that they need to worry about as well. So I think I would definitely wouldn't want to remove drone assist entirely. Maybe look at capping it or limiting the number of people who can assign to a single ship, perhaps. But yeah, I wouldn't want it removed completely.
Okay. And then the last question that the community has: what do you think is the most pressing issue in Eve today? It could be the stuff that we've talked about, it could be something we haven't talked about.
Um, I think the biggest issue right now is the universe was, designed and set up, however you want to phrase it, on the basis of a lot more players, and that player count has dwindled massively, and it's going to continue to dwindle. Um, the old and bold are going to constantly start leaving the game. What we need to be doing is bringing new people in to replace those people, because the more people in the game, the more every single person will benefit. Whether it's, if you're a manufacturer, you still need someone to go out and mine. If you're a PvPer, you need someone to shoot. So I think player retention is the biggest issue facing Eve right now, and if that isn't addressed fairly urgently, then that is going to be the thing that's going to make this game smaller and smaller for all of us.
Okay. Do you think with the dwindling numbers that CCP should think about maybe reducing the amount of systems in the game?
I don't think we're at that point yet. I think we're still at a point where it's doable, it works, and I think we can get back to the point where space can be busy again. But yeah, it's very true right now that particularly flying through nullsec, it's safer than highsec. You can fly through an entire region and not see a single person in space, and that is a problem.
Yeah, I totally agree. Okay, so I have my questions answered. Does anyone out there in Twitchland have questions? And while you guys are frantically typing, what other candidates would you like to see elected alongside you?
Um, I mean, I was I was expecting this question. I was thinking about who I would like to see alongside me. Obviously, there's my friends at Goonswarm. I'm not going to say that because it's the obvious answer, and I'll go for the people outside of that. I think for yourself, like you as the CCP pick last time, I'd love to see you be directly elected this time as well, because what you do for new players is absolutely phenomenal, and it puts me to shame in terms of what I'm doing out in Delve. But I think you, Mike Azaria, of the two names that immediately come to mind, because you guys are the ones who are ultimately doing what I want to do and what I want to campaign for. You are the ones who are solving that retention issue by getting people involved in communities, by giving people that leg up, by giving people the direction. So yeah, yourself and Mike would be my top picks.
Oh, well, thank you. Let's see. We do have some questions. Killer Games wants to know where his missing ships are.
Yeah, Edencom Carrier. I want to see Triglavian Dreadnought before that. Triglavian Dreadnought? Triglavian Carrier before that happens.
Oh no, Triglavian Marauder. Come on.
Oh yeah, yeah, actually, yeah.
We totally solved it in E-Rookies. We want a Edencom Marauder that just zaps everything on grid. That's what we want. It's never
I've
going to
not really
happen.
played with Edencom ships much. Like I've got a Stormbringer, but I've not really used it. But yeah, trig ships are just so fun, and I love the spooling mechanic and having that applied to like some custom fighters that have their own spool up. That'd be a fun game.
What's your cat's name?
My cat name is Evie. She's answers to cat more than anything because usually just bringing live mice into my house and I'm chasing around screaming at the cat. So,
opinion on integrations of RTS, VR, FPS into more side-by-side integration in PvP and PvE?
yeah, so I had a question relating to this on my CSM thread in terms of, how much should Vanguard interact with Eve? And I think I like the idea of Vanguard interacting with Eve in some way. It should interact with the core game. It should have that impact. But I'm very, very nervous about the idea of having it integrated to the point where the core game becomes dependent on an external game.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you have it, and the example I used was if you have it so that a Vanguard mission can disable an anti-blex, then that will become the way to disable the anti-blex, which means we're no longer disabling them in game.
Yep.
And the more things you move into an external game and out of Eve, the less we're all going to be playing Eve. So yeah, it's dangerous ground. I think there is space for it. Hitting things like PI economies or going into faction warfare, there's space to do it there. But there definitely has to be a line where it doesn't take away from the things that we do in the game ourselves.
Yeah, 100%. Someone asked me almost the same question on the forum, and my whole thing is I'd have to wait, I'd have to see, I'd have to hear what CCP has to say, and I'd have to believe that CCP isn't going to mess it up.
Yeah, and the thing is, like, if you integrate too much and then suddenly it's, okay, we've been doing this thing for 2 years, it's been working great, and now the game's dead.
Yeah. Or it becomes the new postcode. That is always a definite possibility.
Yeah.
Yeah, I do think having an effect like PI or giving some sort of in-game new material or whatnot, I think that's reasonable. I definitely would support that. Okay, does anyone else have... What was that?
I know, I was just saying, especially with new Equinox stuff as well, it's obviously introduced a lot around power and stuff like that. There's places it can play, but I don't think core game matters.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, does anyone else have any other questions? Time is starting to run out. And as for you, if people see this interview on YouTube tomorrow and want to carry on the conversation, where can they find you?
Discord is going to be always the easiest way to reach me, so it's I'm_cheating is my Discord handle. I am also in the Rookies Discord as well, so you'll see me with the CSM19 candidates tag in there. So yeah, reach me on Discord, easiest way to chat with me.
Okay, perfect. Anything else that you'd like to say or talk about before we go that we didn't touch on?
I just honestly just want to say thank you for running these interviews like about 40 minutes or 50 minutes or whatever, which should be going has gone like a blur, but I know how exhausting it must be for you, so thank you very much.
You are very welcome. It's my pleasure. I've had a lot of fun talking to all you and hearing all the different views and all the different answers.